Hello, I'm AJ from AJ Tutorials. In this video, we are going to start to use Swift. And this is very exciting because we will now, for the first time, start to learn a bit of coding. So the first thing you should do is to open up Xcode and create a new playground. So click Get Started with a Playground. Then, just like the last video, what we're going to do is make sure that our template is for iOS and we use the blank template. Because we do not want anything, again, we're starting out in our learning process, so we should not use anything except for just blank for right now. So click on Next, and then just save it. So I'm going to save this as Swift Intro. You can name it whatever you want. I really recommend that you follow along with what I do and also listen to what I'm saying so you can really learn some of the concepts that I talk about. Delete everything inside of this file right now. We do not want anything inside of the file. Okay. In Swift, there are some things called variables. Variables are, in the most concise way I can say it, are containers for data. Variables are containers for data. Think about this analogy. Let's say that a variable is similar to a box of Legos. Similar to a box of Legos. The variable is the box. And on that box, there is a label that says Lego. It is the name of the box. Whether you put more stuff into the box, whether you remove stuff out of the box, whether you move the box, that label will always stay. That label will always stay the same. However, what's inside of the box could change. You could add more Legos inside, you could remove some Legos. That essentially is very similar to a variables. All variables have a name, and all variables have a value. The name is what you call the variable, just like how you are calling that container the Lego container. The value is what is actually stored inside of the variable, or back with the analogy, what is inside of the box. In Swift, we use a keyword that is spelled VAR to create variables. Type in VAR and double click on where it says here VAR-Swift var declaration. This is what should pop up. Swift and Xcode is very nice because it gives us placeholders that we can use. The first thing is the name. All variables have a name. Remember, the name cannot be changed. So the name cannot be changed. Values can be changed. Also, it is important to note, I forgot to mention this, when I write 2 slashes, that actually creates a comment. So the entire line right here, the entire line, anything with that number 2, the entire line is a comment. Comments are very useful when learning. You can take notes and you can also just write general things down about the code that you're writing. So whenever I use these 2 slashes, I am pretty much writing comments for you, writing notes for you. When Swift actually runs this file, or when Xcode, actually runs this file, everything that is in comments will actually not be run. It will just skip over the comments. So that is very useful. You can write whatever you want without worrying about accidentally causing an error in your code or a bug. Anyway, so back to the placeholders. All variables have a name and it cannot be changed. The value inside of it can be changed. For example, I might have a variable called number of cookies. Now you'll also notice that a lot of programmers on the internet, they will do similar to how I just did. They use something called Camel Case. It is proper coding convention. It is when, if you have multiple words, for example in this variable name, you will make sure that the first word is lowercase and all the words afterward, the letter that starts the word, are capitalized. So number of cookies. And I can set the number of cookies. Let's say I have 8 cookies. This is a variable that has been created. It has a name of number of cookies and a value of 8. I can change this value later. So for example, if I realize that I actually now have 10 cookies, let's say I bake 2 more, I can make my variable equal to 10. So what do? I type in the name of the variable, number of cookies, and then I set it equal to 10. Now you'll notice that I did not use the var keyword again. That is because the var keyword is only used when you are creating a variable, not when you are editing a variable. This equal sign is also what is known as an assignment operator. It assigns a value to a variable. So what have I done so far? I've created a variable named number of cookies and I've set it to 8. Then later I change the number of cookies to 10 by saying number of cookies is now equal to 10. Now if you remember what I typed in when I did VAR and I clicked here, how we had a name and a value. What are things that we can actually put in the value area? The things that we can put into the value area are called data types. There are many data types in Swift. We will be using just some of the basics to start out with. The first one is a whole number. Whole numbers in Swift are known as integers. Then you might have decimal numbers. Decimal numbers are known as doubles in Swift. Then you might have a true or false value. True or false values in Swift are known as booleans. And the last thing is normal text. Normal text is known as a string. We'll be creating multiple variables with all of these data types now. So I'm going to, down here, create a variable. Remember, we create a variable using the var keyword. So we have var and then name. Let's just set this name to sample integer. Integers are whole numbers. So any value that does not have a decimal place will work, such as 8. 8 is a whole number. This sample integer variable is of type integer. There is a great way in Swift that we can get information out of our code. It is called the print statement. Print. If you remember in the last video, we had the debug area when we clicked on this button here, and I remembered to say that it's very important to use. Printing is what actually pulls information out of our code and into our debug area. So if I were to say print and then sample integer, and then I click the run button right here, you will notice that Xcode prints out in my debug area 8, because that is the value of sample integer. If I set my sample integer to 10 and I print out sample integer, it prints out 10. There's also something you can put inside of the print, and it is called type. Simply type in type and double click right here when it says meta type, type, and then of t. You'll notice that now we are printing the type of, and then we have a placeholder. If we put in our variable sample integer and we were to run it, you will notice that it prints out int, which is short for integer. Using the print and then type of is very useful to figure out data types. Now that we know how to check data types, let's create another variable. Let's create a sample double. Doubles are numbers with decimal values. So for example, 9.4 is a double because it has a decimal value. If I were to use the same print statement and then type of, and then I typed in sample double, and I were to run my code with using the play button, you notice that it prints out double. That is because sample double has a decimal on it. Now you might be wondering, well, does 9.0, does that count as a double or an integer? Because, well, it's equivalent to a whole number, but it also still has a decimal as 0.0. In Swift, any values with 0.0 are still considered a double because they have a decimal in them. you will see if I set this to 9.0 and I print out the type of sample double, it will still be a double type. This is important to know. Now let's create a Boolean. Booleans can only store two values, either true or false. Let's create that. Remember, we create a variable by using the var keyword. So type in var, and then the name will be sample Boolean, and the value will be set to either true or false. So I can just type in true or false. But wait, it's very important to remember in Swift that Booleans are case sensitive. I can only type in true or false in all lowercase. I cannot do something like this where I use a capital T. You will notice that it should give me an error on the side. Use of unresolved identifier true, because true in Swift doesn't exist. So if I type in true in all lowercase, you notice that it works. And I can use the print type of, and then sample Boolean, sample Boolean. And if I were to run this, it prints out BOOL, which is short for Boolean. So you might be wondering, well, why would I only store true or false values? Well, let's say it is raining outside. You can have a variable, for example, let's create that in fact. Let's create a variable is raining. If it is raining, you can set it to true. If it isn't, you can set it to false. Booleans will become exceptionally useful when we start to talk about conditions. That will be in a later video. Also, one thing which I forgot to mention is that variable names should have no spaces in them. That is something that I just thought I should mention. So we've now created a sample integer. We've created a sample double, and we've created a sample Boolean. There is one left, and that is the string. Strings are simply a collection or sequence of characters. What do I mean by characters? Well, anything on your keyboard is considered a character. W is considered a character, O is considered a character, R is considered a character, and so on. This is useful to remember. Usually we use strings when we are talking about text. For example, again remember, we create a variable using the var keyword, and then in the placeholder I can call this sample string, and let's say I want to set this equal to hello world. I can just type in hello world, right? Well, you notice that it gives me many errors. There is something very unique with strings. All strings must be surrounded by quotation marks in Swift. And think about the reason for that. Let's say I set this to hello world. I could have created at some point a variable named hello, like so, a variable named hello, and it actually counts this hello as the same variable, because Swift, when you are not using quotation mark, it's looking for something else that we created named hello. And if it can't find it, it's going to give us an error. That is why when we are creating strings, we always need to encapsulate them in quotation marks. So now you might be wondering, well, is the value stored have the quotation marks in it? Well, let's find out. Let's use the print statement to print out the value of sample string. If I were to run my code, you'll notice it prints hello world without the quotation marks. Swift uses quotation marks to know when the string starts and when the string ends. It doesn't actually count the quotation marks in the string. The next video will be mainly about strings so you can learn more about them. So far we've talked about variables. We've also talked about the many data types. We've talked about the whole numbers and how they are integers. We've talked about decimal numbers that are doubled, true, false, which are booleans, and text equals string. In fact, I think I said that the next video will be on strings. That is incorrect. That'll be 2 videos from now, but there will be a video pretty soon going more in depth with strings because strings are so useful. I mean, there's text pretty much in every application you use. So we've created a variable. And if I were to copy this down here, the variables are containers for data and the value can change. There's also something in Swift called a constant. Constants are containers for data whose values cannot be changed. Think about a science experiment. In a science experiment, constants are used to kind of set a standard. It does not ever change. We create constants very similar to how we create variables. However, the keyword we use to create constants is let. The let keyword is set up very similar to var. If you notice, they both have a name in the value. But when you create a constant, the value cannot be changed. The same data types are used in constants as in variables. So everything we just learned about integers, doubles, booleans, and strings still apply. However, let's try something. Let's say I have number of pizza slices. And I set that to 5. You will notice that if I type in number of pizza slices and I try to change it to 9, like how we can with variables, it gives me an error because it is a constant and it cannot change. You can see right here, you cannot assign the value because it is a constant. So that is the difference between a constant and a variable. So in this video, you've learned what variables are, how they are containers for data, what they can hold, which are the data types. We learned about integers, doubles, booleans, and strings. We've learned how to create variables. We've learned how to change variables. Remember, we change variables by simply typing in the name of the variable we want to change and then set it equal to the new value. We do not use the var keyword. We've learned about doubles, booleans, strings. We've learned that booleans are case sensitive, which means you cannot type in true as capitalized. We've also learned that strings must be encapsulated in quotation marks. We've learned the print statement, which is so useful when interacting with code. And we've learned how to create constants. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please leave comments in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe for more content. Again, thanks for watching.